Okay, so in today's lesson, students will be able to add integers with the same sign. Students will be able to add integers to their opposites. Students will be able to add integers with different signs. We're going to use the number line method. There's two methods. Use whatever method you want to use. Me personally, I'm a fan of the second method more, but of course, use whatever method works for you. So, thought process. Add two positive numbers. You're looking more at the second number here. So in the example, 2 plus 3, right? The second number being 3. If that number is positive, you're always going to be moving right. So once again, second number, if it's positive, you move right. If it's negative, you move left. The first number, you're always going to graph. So I'll do one example here. Let's go ahead and put 0, -1, -2, -3, and then let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Right now, all I did was create a number line, right? From -3 all the way to +6. The first number, 2, I'm going to graph. So here's where 2 will be. Now, because the second number is a positive number, I'm going to move that many spaces to the right. Because it's 3, I'm moving 3 spaces to the right. So 1, 2, 3. And my answer is 5. Yes, I understand that I made this a lot more visual than I had to. Most of you know 2 plus 3 is 5, but I'm just trying to show you how to use the number line method when we go ahead and add negative numbers as well. So try these two on your own. Once again, create a number line. You're going to graph the first number, and then the second number will tell you how many spaces to move your dot, and if you're going to move it left or right. So once again, graph the first number, and then move it, in this case, to the right because it's positive, move it 1 space. Second scenario, right, graph the first number, and then move it 4 spaces to the right, once again because it's positive. So do these two on your own, and then have me or your teacher assistant check it. Alright, so using the number line technique, right, add two negative numbers. It's the same thing as before. The first number we're going to graph, and then the second number we're going to move our dot that many spaces. However, notice now the second number is negative. So here we're going to be moving it to the left and not the right. So the first example I'll do together. Once again, I'm just creating a normal number line. It doesn't matter how far you want to go. Decide to go from -4 to 4. So I'm graphing -1 first, and -1 is right here. Now I'm adding -3. So that means I'm going to be moving this dot, this red dot, 3 spaces. But because it's negative, I'm moving it to the left. So 1, 2, and 3. My final answer is -4. I would like you to try these two on your own as well. I would like you to do these two on your own as well, and then call me over. Now comes the second method. To me, this is a better method. Instead of creating a number line, because let's face it, what happens if it was like -100 plus -1000? I doubt you want to do a number line. But the number line is good for the beginning, right? It's good just to transition into knowing how to handle negative numbers. But eventually you want to go to this method. And this method is very simple. When you're adding, please understand, it's only when you see a plus sign. You need to be able to see it. Whenever you see a plus sign, you have to ask yourself these two questions. The first question is, are signs the same or different? If signs are the same, you're going to find the sum, right? Think of same and sum. They both have an S. So same means to find the sum, which means you would just add. And then the second thing is, if signs are the same and you add, just keep the sign of whatever both numbers are. So if both numbers are positive, add them, and then make the answer positive. If both numbers are negative, add them, and then make your answer negative. If signs are different, meaning that if one number is positive and one number is negative, but there's still a plus sign, you want to do this instead. Different means difference. And there you would actually subtract the 2 to get the number. And then instead of keeping the sign of both numbers, because obviously here you have 2 different numbers, you're going to keep the one that has more players. So if the positive has a bigger absolute value, if it has more players, you're going to keep that sign. If both signs are different and the number that's negative has more players, that's called the absolute value, you would keep that sign instead. We'll do the absolute value method now. So here, there's a plus sign. Please understand, there has to be a plus sign in between in order to do this. If there's a minus sign, a multiplication symbol, or a division symbol, you're not doing this. Only when there's a plus sign. Just ask yourself, are signs the same? If signs are the same, then add them. 2 plus 4 is 6. And then, of course, you keep the sign. Because both numbers are negative, it's going to be negative 6. Done. Here, once again, are signs the same? Yes. So I'm going to add. 3 plus 4, notice I'm saying it without the negative symbol. I'm just doing 3 plus 4, which is 7. But because they're both negative, I keep the sign. So it's negative 7. Last one, same question. Are signs the same? If so, what do you do? Please go ahead and solve this one on your own, and then call me over. Okay, so now we're in part B. So part B, we're going to add its opposite. So just for example, so I'll read the whole thing first. So thought process, add a positive integer. It's the same thing I said before. If the second number is positive, you move it right. If the second number is negative, move it left. All right? So positive, you can go to the right. And if it's negative, move it to the left. So negative 2 plus 2. Once again, I create a number line. I graph the first number, and negative 2 is right here. And then I'm going to move my orange dot 2 spaces to the right, because it's positive. 1, 2. And my answer is 0. Now this is called adding their opposites because negative 2 and 2 are opposite of each other. Just like 5 and negative 5, 10 and negative 10. So whenever you add opposite numbers to each other, you're going to notice that there's a pattern. But I'll let you figure that out on your own. Again, do the number line for these two. Graph it, and then move your dot that many spaces either to the right or left. See if you can figure that on your own. Afterwards, see if you can figure out the pattern that I was talking about. You'll notice that all 3 answers, the one I did with you, and these 2, you'll notice that they're all the same answer. Why? Same thing as before, when you add a negative integer, right, the second number, if it's a negative, you're just going to move it to the left. So an arrow to the left, that many spaces. So I'll do the first one and then do the other 2. I create my number line. I'll graph the first number. And then the second number, because it's negative 2, I'm going to move 2 spaces to the left. 1, 2. And my answer is 0. Please go ahead and do the next 2 on your own using the graphing method, and then see if you see a pattern there as well. To be clear, down the road, I will not have you do the graphing method if you don't want to. Some kids are like, oh, I still want to use it, I love it. By all means, if you really like this method, then go ahead and use it moving forward. For now, most kids just do it for this activity so you can see that there's a pattern, and then of course use the absolute value method if you prefer moving forward. Okay, thought process, add a positive integer, right? If you're adding a positive integer, you're moving it to the right. So again, just for now, try the number line method. You can see why I'm not the biggest fan of the number line method, because your number line might be too small and you have to expand it like I just did. Nothing wrong with it, just not a fan of it. So I'm going to graph the negative 8, because that's the first number that I see. And I'll be clear on this too. I always read my problems like I would read a book, right? You always read a book left to right. So when I read this left to right, the negative 8's first. That's why I'm reading negative 8 first. So I graph the negative 8, and then this number tells me how many spaces to move it. Because it's positive, I move it to the right, and I'm moving it 10 spaces in this specific example. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So my answer is positive 2. Negative 8 plus 10 is negative 2. Again, just try the graphing method here. Make sure that you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and then we'll go over the absolute value method. Okay, this is the last one for the graphing method. Add a negative integer, you're going to move left, right? positive 8 plus negative 2. We have to graph it first. 0. So I'll graph the positive 8, and then I'm going to add negative 2. That means I'm going to move it 2 spaces to the left. 1, 2. And my answer is 6. Again, try the graphing method. Go ahead and do this example here and these 3 examples here. Please, once again, try the graphing method. I just want you to understand what you're doing first before you go into the faster way, which is the absolute value method. Alright, so now we can do the absolute value method. So, listen, good news. You don't need these number lines anymore. One thing I have to stress though is you only use this method if there's a plus sign in between the 2 numbers. Both numbers can be positive, negative, different signs, it doesn't matter. But what does matter is there has to be a plus sign in between them. If there's not a plus sign in between them, you cannot use this method. So when there's a plus sign in between them, just like before, right? If signs were the same, you find the sum. And then I went over ahead of time, if the signs were different, you find the difference. So in this example here, you have a positive 3 and you have a negative 6. So signs are different. If signs are different, you're going to find the difference. That means you're going to subtract. 6 minus 3 is 3. And then the second question is this. If signs are different, then you got to ask yourself which one has a bigger absolute value. I tell kids it's the same thing as thinking who has more players. So think of it like tug of war right now. You got 3 positive players, and you also have 6 negative players. Who's going to win? Right? Most likely the team that has more players, so the negative team's going to win. So it's going to be negative 3. That's all there is to it. So once again, I recommend the absolute value method. However, moving forward, it is up to you in which method you want to do. It's good to know how to do both, obviously. So I'll do actually this one with you guys, and then you move on your own. So this one, I'm just going to use the absolute value method and not use the graphing method at all. So it's 4 plus negative 3. Once again, are signs the same or different? If they're the same, add them. If they're different, subtract them. Because this is a positive and this is a negative, signs are different. Because signs are different, I'm going to subtract. 4 minus 3 is 1. The second question is, who has more players? The positive team or the negative team? In this problem, the positive team has more players, right? So my answer is going to be positive 1 and not negative 1. And I'm done. Try this one on your own and then call me over afterwards. With this problem, just use the absolute value method. All right? You're going to ask yourself, are signs the same or different? If signs are different, you're going to subtract. If signs are the same, you're going to add. If you subtract, just ask yourself who had more players, and of course, keep the sign of whoever had more players. Okay, part D. This one is a 3-number problem. Not that much difficult than what we just did before. My only advice to you is take it 2 numbers at a time. So even though it says negative 9 plus 2 plus negative 3, what I would do first is I would add 2 numbers. Now when there's a plus sign, the 2 numbers don't need to be next to each other. A lot of kids I know, they just do negative 9 plus 2. But when there's a plus sign, you can pick any 2 numbers you want. I personally would pick negative 9 and negative 3 because signs are the same. And negative 9 plus negative 3, because signs are the same, I find the sum, right? Same sum. It means I'm going to add 9 plus 3 is 12, and I'm going to keep the sign of both numbers, which is a negative. If that doesn't make sense, just ask yourself who has more players, the negative. The negative, so then it's negative 12. Then I'll bring down that plus 2. Then I ask myself again, are signs the same or different? In this problem here, one's a negative and one's a positive. So here, signs are now different. So now I'm going to subtract. 12 minus 2 is 10. And then who has more players? The negative or the positive team? The negative team, right? The negative has 12 players. The positive team only has 2 players. The negative team's going to win. So my answer is not 10, but negative 10. So once again, when you have problems that have more than 2 numbers, just take it 2 numbers at a time. You can go left to right, or you can group the ones with the same sign first. Either one's fine with me. So go ahead and do number 2 on your own, and then we'll move on to the last problem. A submarine is at 400 feet below sea level. If it ascends 150 feet and then descends 320 feet, how far is it above or below sea level? So they want you to maybe draw a visual, then write out an expression and solve it. I mean, I'll leave it up to you. For those who like a number line, then yeah, draw your visual. And, I can explain that maybe in class if you want me to help you with drawing out a picture. But I'm going to use another method that works all the time. And that is pulling out key numbers and knowing what it represents. I think that is something that's more beneficial than even drawing something out. Sometimes kids need both. But if it's one or the other, I feel like pulling out the number and knowing what that number means will help you a lot more. So let's do this one together. The first number that I see is 400 below sea level. So look, a bullet, I'm writing 400, and then I'm going to use keywords in there to help me understand it better. Because it's below sea level, do you think it's positive or negative 400? It's going to be negative 400. So 400 below would represent actually negative 400. If it ascends 150 feet, I'm going to stop there, right? Once again, pulling out the next number that I see, but with a key word, which in this case is ascends. So the word ascend means like move up, go forward, right? Go to the right for math, number line. So in short, ascend would be a positive number, right? Ascending, because it's going to increase the number. You're moving to the right, you're moving forward, however you want to phrase it. So it's a positive. So this is going to translate to just positive 150. And then descends 320. If anything else, try getting better knowing prefixes, especially in math. Maybe you don't know what descend means, but D, right? Like decrease, for example, the prefix is always the same, where it means down, negative, however you want to phrase it. So descend 320 would be negative 320. So now we pulled out all the numbers and what it represents. So this right here, right? All this really just meant negative 400, positive 150, and negative 320. But it makes a lot more sense when you write it out. Now the last bullet, because there's no more numbers, is just going to be in your own words. This kind of paraphrase what they're asking for. So it says here, how far is it above or below sea level? So, I mean, if you're just going to put in your own words, it's just and they just want to know at the end of the day, after you add all these, would it be above or below sea level? So now I'm going to take these three numbers and I'm going to write them left to right. Negative 400 plus 150 plus negative 320. Watch. You went from this whole word problem here to something now, right, in green, that you can actually solve. This right here is no different than number 2, or the problem that we solved together, number 1. When you're solving 3 numbers, right, always solve it 2 numbers at a time. Once again, whenever you're adding, you don't have to go in order. It doesn't have to be left to right. You could jump if you want. I like to add numbers that are the same sign first. So I'm going to do negative 400 plus negative 320. And then here, I'm going to ask myself, are signs the same or different? Obviously, they're both negative, so signs are the same. So I'm going to add them. And 400 plus 320 is 720. And then even though this question is kind of silly to ask, who has more players, the negative? Obviously, the negative does. So it's negative 720. Gone, gone. Now I'll bring down the plus 150. Same thing as before. Negative, positive, right? And then I'll just ask myself again, are signs the same or different? If signs are the same, I would add. If signs are different, I would subtract. In this case, signs are now different, so I'm going to subtract. Always put the one with the bigger absolute value on top. So I'm writing 720, but I'm only writing its absolute value, so I'm writing without the negative symbol. And it's 720 minus 150. And I'll subtract. 0 minus 0 is 0. 2 minus 5 you can't do, right? Bottom big or borrow. So we're going to cross out the 7, make it a 6, and make that 2 a 12. Now 12 minus 5 is 7. And then 6 minus 1 is 5. So my answer is 570. But, one more time, you got to ask yourself who had more players. So in this case, did the negative have more players or the positive? Obviously the negative had more players. So therefore my answer is negative 570. One more step and we're done. Technically there's your answer, but obviously you can't have negative, right? You can't have a negative feet, I mean. And don't forget what the final question was asking for. You know, is it above or below sea level? Obviously we're talking about feet. It doesn't make sense if you say negative 570 feet, right? Because distance can't really be negative. So we're going to convert the negative symbol into a word. Well, don't overthink this. What word over here did we use as a negative? Right? Did we use the word below as a negative? So all I got to do now is say 570 feet, right? Watch this. Below sea level. And that is my final answer.